Hey guys, Ricky Widmer here from Most Valuable Podcast. You're about to listen to a little bit of our primetime podcast that we recorded this week. Make sure to go to Blog Talk Radio / Most Valuable Podcast for our full-length podcast that you can go ahead and download. I hope you enjoy it. I know me and Brandon did recording it.
This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
What's up, everybody? Ricky Widmer here, along with the one, the only, Brandon Swanson.
Hey.
And it is great to say that again, because if you guys missed last week's episode of the Primetime Podcast, Brandon was not here. You also, I could not see your wonderful faces. So if you're on YouTube, hello. It is great to see your faces yet again after not last week. You're on Blog Talk Radio, iTunes, or Stitcher. Thank you guys for obviously the continued support, downloading and listening to our podcast. But big guy, you're back. You took a week off. You went to Florida. You told me, hey, Ricky, figure it out. And I did. I tried my best to figure it out all on my lonesome. But how was Florida, big guy?
It was a lot of fun. It was so much fun. Didn't want to come back, but reacclimating myself to things.
I saw that you almost left us. You gave your resume to the worldwide leader down there. I saw Jimmy Fallon. You were also trying to get in line with the Fallster, I was gonna say. That's a crappy nickname, but whatever. We're gonna roll with it. I'm glad though that you are back and ready to talk about things because we got a jam-packed show. I saved a topic for you, Brandon.
You did.
I saved one for you. So we're going to start the show off with. I was going to talk about this last week, decided, I'm going to wait until they figure out, they being the SEC, figure out the ruling, but now we can. Malik Zaire officially transferring to the Florida Gators. We're going to talk about what it means for Florida. I mean, we just talked about what it meant for Texas, but it doesn't matter. He ain't going there. So now we got to talk about what it means for the Florida Gators. Then we are going to talk about, we're going to go back to college basketball for a week, talk about Thad Matta. Who should Ohio State get to replace Thad? And then we're going to continue our little 2018 NFL draft conversations. This week, Calvin Ridley, and will he be the next Reggie Wayne after comments from NFL scout Bucky Brooks about the subject? So, Brandon, we're going to dive in to our first one, though. The SEC announced last Friday, well after I recorded, so I was glad that I waited on this one, that they intended to amend their rule for graduate students. This amending of the rule allowed Zaire to not only pick Florida, but be able to play at Florida this upcoming season as transferring in. So with that being said, Malik Zaire said, you know what? I'm going to transfer to Florida. We're recording this on Tuesday. By the time you're hearing this, he would have officially been announced transferring, that he's going to Florida and actually have everything set in stone. So I'm going to kick it over to you. Let's start this. What does this mean for the Gators?
Well, I want to first start off by saying kind of what has happened with Malik Zaire and kind of the timeline of everything that has happened with Malik Zaire in college. So he had 4 years South Bend, could never really get a full control of the starting job because he didn't play as a freshman in 13, couldn't beat out Golson in 14, broke his right ankle after 2 games, game and a half in 15, and then was beat out by Deshaun Kaiser in 16 and never took hold of a starting role again. So that's what we know about Malik Zaire. We don't have a lot of stats on Zaire. We don't have much of anything, and I think that some people may say, well, Brandon, you were just talking a couple of weeks ago when you said if he goes to Texas, he could really be, he would certainly fit the style that Texas is looking for. But does he have enough behind him, Ricky? Does he have enough behind him where Florida says, you know what, you beat out Luke Del Rio. You beat out all of the other guys that we have on the roster at the quarterback position. And now, does he know what he's doing? Has he had flashes of brilliance, flashes of huge talent? Yeah, that's why he started out as the starter in 2015. But then unfortunately, he did get hurt, and that's what ended up happening, is that he never found that starting role again. And it's an interesting article that I've looked at on Dog Nation by Chip Towers. And he takes a complete opposite view on Malik Zaire going to Florida than most people are. And he's taking the kind of the pessimistic view. And I think it's an interesting one. And I look at it because most people will take the optimistic view and will say, oh, he's going to be great.
He's going to be awesome. Starter.
Automatic starter. That's what we keep here. Automatic starter. But what if he's not? What if he's not? And what if he doesn't end up being that guy? Then that's another Florida team, as you had mentioned in another podcast, that went for a Notre Dame quarterback and it didn't work out. The other one being Everett Golson at Florida State. And now you have Malik Zaire at Florida. And he's a guy who can certainly keep defenses and SEC defenses, which are better defenses, I think, than most of the Power Fives. You could say Big Ten defenses are pretty good, too, because they hold down opposing offenses, and that's why you have a lot of low-scoring games sometimes in the Big Ten. And I think that what he can do is he offers the fact that he's not always going to pass. He can run a little bit as well. And I think if he's fully healthy, he'll be very good. But we don't know. And Florida doesn't know. And Johnny doesn't know. And Scotty doesn't know.
I like that little Euro trip reference.
So I think that ultimately there will be a competition. Luke Del Rio's not, I don't know if he's fully healthy. Neither does Florida. But I don't think they had, obviously, enough confidence in Philippe Franks that he would be able to get it done because they went and they pushed to get Zaire for him to come to Florida. And what's he doing now? Well, he's going to Florida.
And let me state this. It should be and it will be an open competition this offseason for the job. I don't want people to automatically assume, hey, you know what, Zaire's coming in, Franks, who's the freshman, take a back seat. You're not going to start this year. He's going to have the right. Felipe Franks is going to have the right to compete for this job and win this job. The thing that I look at is I'm kind of sitting right on the line when it comes to Malik Zaire and the Florida Gators, because in the back of my mind, I think of what you brought up. We talked about this. It was actually the first ever topic that we talked about with the Primetime Podcast way, way back. And I want to say it was May 17th of 2015. We talked about Everett Golson. Is he going to go to Florida State? Is he going to go to Alabama? He eventually picked Florida State. Didn't really do much. Didn't really be the same Everett Golson that we saw at Notre Dame. The only difference here, Malik Zaire never had that success that Golson had at Notre Dame. Golson coming off of a national championship appearance with that Notre Dame Fighting Irish team. So there's that in the back of my head. However, I look at the SEC and I think to myself, Cam Newton, Tim Tebow, Johnny Manziel, I'll even throw Jalen Hurts in there to a degree. What do all four of those guys have in common? They don't just beat you with their arms, they can beat you with their legs. So I also look at it and go, Malik Zaire has really the perfect tools. And I know what you're saying. Well, Ricky, the Tim Tebow that was a different system. That was the Urban Meyer system. That we're in a different system now. Johnny Manziel, that was Sumlin. You've got Nick Saban over at Alabama. Hurts has all these weapons to work with at Alabama, and Cam Newton was a number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft. But I look at that and I go, there's got to be a correlation with these guys. And think about it. Tim Tebow, Heisman quarterback, was able to get it done in the SEC with both his arms and his legs. Cam Newton won a national title with Auburn, getting it done with both his arm and his leg. Jalen Hurts goes to the national title, getting it done with more so his arms, but could also beat you with his legs. Not as much as the other three, though. And Johnny Manziel, we know what happened there. I talked about it last week. He's the only really good season that Kevin Sumlin ever had. The Heisman year, another Heisman quarterback. So to me, I look at it and go, hey, if Malik Zaire can get all the ducks in a row, all of them lined up, there might be a correlation here that he might be able to get something done against SEC defenses, because I look at it and I go, is there a reason why these guys who are dual threat guys have had so much success against SEC defenses?
I think that the points that you bring up, I think they're good examples. They're very good examples of what could be. And I think that when you talk about what happened with Everett Golson, it was the fact that Golson came from Notre Dame where he actually did something to then go into Florida State where he couldn't. And maybe this is the opposite.
Plus, he had the shadow of Jameis Winston.
He did. I mean, it was a huge shadow.
Because Winston was just leaving at that point.
But maybe we see the opposite with Malik Zaire. Maybe we see a guy in Zaire who only had 98 pass attempts in his time at Notre Dame.
He's got to prove himself.
Maybe he turns it around and is able to make something of himself at Florida. Maybe in the 1 year he has at Florida, maybe he's able to do something. Maybe he gets them to... Maybe he gets them to the playoffs. That's a stretch. But maybe he's able to really make them super competitive throughout the SEC. Maybe he puts Florida on the map, solidifies them as a strong SEC team, and says, you know what, Alabama, you're not going to be the only one in this SEC run this year. And I think that if he can do that, that's a win. But that's going to be asking a lot for a guy who's only completed 98 passes. But you have to also remember, too, that he threw 6 touchdowns, no interceptions in his time at Notre Dame as well. So this guy is a guy that has so much to prove, and you would think that he has plenty of years to be able to do it. However, he doesn't. He has just one. And Ricky, my thing is this 1 year going to hurt him? Is this 1 year going to hurt him? Because if he comes in, he ends up being the starter, theoretical. But if he ends up coming in being the starter, has a bad year, does that hurt him because, you know, it's taking him some time to adjust to the Florida system. It's taking him time to adjust to a new team, new teammates, everything, like new coaching staff. And he has nothing left. And then at the same time, does it hurt that if he goes there and does really, really well? Because then people would say he needs more time, but he doesn't have it.
Well, and I see this as, I look at this and I go, hey, you know what? With the whole time thing, Malik Zaire's got to come in and know, I got 1 year. I ain't got time. Ain't nobody got time for that to learn the playbook. I got to come in. I got to do my due diligence. I don't have all the luxury that, like, Felipe Frank can come in and say, hey, you know what? I can take a little bit of time. Take my time with the playbook, because I can use my freshman year as kind of like a learning season. Zaire don't got that. He has to step in, pick up the playbook quickly so that he can be successful in this 1 year that he has. And that's part of the reason why I was shocked at this decision. I was shocked but wasn't shocked. The part that shocked me was that he chose Florida over Texas. The reason being is Texas would have been a better fit for him. He would have done better things, I would say, in the Tom Herman offense. It would have been easier to pick up that playbook because he would fit so well into that system. However, the hard part there is he'd have to beat out much harder talent in Shane Buechele. The part that didn't shock me is he wanted to go play in the SEC. And the SEC is a tough conference, tough division. If you win the SEC, odds are you are going to the college football playoff and are going to have a chance to kind of fight for that national title. So that part didn't surprise me. But because he's only got the 1 year, I think there's going to have to be a sense of urgency with Malik Zaire saying, hey, I got to learn this playbook. I ain't got time to kind of sit there and do this or that. And the one thing that I was kind of looking up that I find interesting is I'm looking at the main opponent is Alabama in the SEC. I think we can all agree with that. Florida last year with Appleby and Del Rio as their main starters still won their division. And odds are Zaire, the goal would be to get them back to that point. And I look at their few last losses. I think I went back all the way to the 2013 season with just Alabama games. The things that I'm noticing about the quarterbacks that have beaten them is last year, The only quarterback that beat him was Deshaun Watson, who I would say is a dual threat quarterback, had 43 rushing yards in that national championship game. Then you also have Chad Kelly beat him. Chad Kelly had 21 and a touchdown on 8 attempts running in that game. Ohio State, who had Cardell Jones, who had 43 yards on the ground that game. They also had Ezekiel Elliott, who was the best running back in that draft class. The only one is Bo Wallace beat him. He did more through the air. He only had 32 on the ground. And then in 2013, Trevor Knight wasn't really a runner at all when he beat him in the bowl game. He's the exception. And then you had Nick Marshall, who had 99 yards on the ground when they beat Alabama 34-28. So just going back to 2013, odds are if you have a quarterback that can do it through the air and is even just competent on the ground, you're going to beat Alabama. And I think that is the reason why Florida, you say, well, they had Franks. Why would they even look to get Zaire? Which quarterback is going to give us the best opportunity to knock off the juggernaut? And I think that that's part of the reason why. You look at it and you go, hey, if this guy can give us some good, doesn't turn the ball over through the air, and can get it done with both his arms and his legs, we could have a chance against Nick Saban and the Tide.
So here's something, and I will get back to what you just said in a moment, but here's something. So, again, Chip Towers, who wrote the article on Dog Nation, he said...
And we're going to put that in the description for you guys.
We will, because I really do think it's an interesting article to read from the opposite perspective of what most people have thought and said about what Malik Zaire will be able to do at Florida. So I'm taking a lot of the information from here, and I think they're good points. And he said that he went up to Notre Dame's campus, South Bend, and he took a look at Zaire and stuff like that. He said not one person had anything bad to say about Zaire. Said it seemed like a guy who had always done everything the right way. Upstanding student, player, teammate, all this stuff. But he said that what he continually was told is that he had his chance and he wasn't going to play. And now going back to what you just mentioned about having this dual threat quarterback against Alabama, this whole thing with Malik Zaire is what really do we know about him? That's the thing. A guy who's
the big unknown.
The guy who's only thrown 98 passes in his collegiate career. A guy who's run a little bit, but not a ton. 324 yards rushing in 17 games. A guy who we don't know. That's the thing. Is that Florida? I mean, they know this. They know they're taking a chance on somebody, but is a guy who you have nothing, who you know nothing, basically nothing about. Is that the best one that you think is going to be able to beat Alabama because you think that he's going to be successful in both areas? And I'm playing a little devil's advocate in this because I don't know. None of us know. None of us know how Malik Zaire is going to be because the people, and I was one of them, who thought that
he was going to go to Texas.
No, I was going to say for the Chicago Bears when they went and they drafted a quarterback, and who was that quarterback, Ricky?
They went ahead and got the Trubisky.
Yes, absolutely. So Mitchell Trubisky, a guy who I thought, he didn't have enough experience. He played a whole year, and I didn't think he had enough experience. Malik Zaire was at Notre Dame forever.
And hasn't played a full season.
And has nothing.
Now, here's the thing I want to say about that is Florida is actually, they're not handcuffed to starting Malik Zaire.
They're not. And I don't want to make it seem like they are, but you go after a guy who's only got a year left, the thinking has to be they really want him to eventually be in that role.
However, the thinking that I would go with is this offseason, whatever quarterback's going to give you the best chance to win, go with them. And with Florida, I feel like with Zaire, because of that unknown, because of that he hasn't played a full season, if they decide this offseason that, hey, he's not the guy, we don't want him being the starter, they're not going to get a lot of backlash from their fans. Like, oh, why did we bring him in then? Why did we bring this transfer in if you're not going to play him? Everett Golson was a little bit of a different case because he had that success. He had that kind of pedigree at Notre Dame. Malik Zaire don't have that. However, if he can come in, and the big thing this season for Malik Zaire, the key word for it is going to be redemption. Because I like what you said. When you were talking about it and you said, you know what, he went to South Bend, no one could say a bad thing about him. That he did the right thing, he was a great student. The one thing is, and I say this is more against the Notre Dame coaching staff, of he had his chance and he's not going to start. That to me says a lot more about what's going on Notre Dame coaching-wise with Brian Kelly than it does with Malik Zaire. And Malik Zaire probably messed up once. And Brian Kelly most likely said, that's it, you're done, you're not going to start. And if that's the case, Zaire needs to come into this year saying, I've learned from my mistakes, I'm going to do everything I can to win this job, learn this playbook, and win games here at Florida. Because like we said, he's only got 1 year. He only has 1 year to flip the script and do good things. So for Florida, I look at it, low risk, high reward. If you sit him, there's no risk. If you start him and he does well, there's some high reward. Yeah. High reward with that. But there's virtually no risk to playing him and he does bad and sitting him and he doesn't play. There's no risk there. But if you play him and he wins games and he makes you successful, there's your high reward.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that you're right. I think you're right on with that, especially with this being his final year. He doesn't have any left after this. This is it.
Yeah.
And I think that it is a smart move by Florida, and I think that you are absolutely correct in what you're saying.
And the thing that will be the most interesting this year to me with Florida is if he does start, what kind of happens this year, because their division, I think they'll win. With Zaire out there, if he plays well, I think it'll be them and Georgia between those two teams for the division. And then I would really want to see a Florida-Alabama SEC title game to see if he can redeem himself against Alabama. But before we move on and go to college basketball, is there anything with Malik Zaire in Florida that you think we didn't hit, you think we have to touch before we move on?
I think we are good.
And this is where I point on the question to you guys, or turn the question on to you guys to respond in the comment section. Continue the conversation down below in the comment section. Let us know what you think of Malik Zaire transferring for Florida. What does this mean for the Florida Gators? And what do you think will happen with the Gators and Zaire this season? Well, thank you guys for checking out this video from the Primetime Podcast. If you want to check out more, click right over here. The video's right over here. Check it out. Check it out. Check it out.